Waves of sand, dust, and ash blow across the deserted highway. Grass and brush have reclaimed many of the spaces once occupied by asphalt and concrete. Those buildings that remain standing after the explosions wear their facades loosely. Occasionally, the prevailing silence is interrupted as pieces break free from the deteriorating structures and tumble down, adding to the giant piles of debris. The painted walls of our homes, our schools, have been replaced by black char and broken pipes. There are few buildings left, but fewer trees. The same explosions that reduced the buildings to rubble also stripped the land of plants taller than a 4-year-old. The sun bears down on us as we gather in the center of town, what's left of us at least. We survived the apocalypse, and now we must figure out how to survive the aftermath. The world as we knew it is gone. It is time for us to rebuild, to dare to dream of a new world, the future.
Welcome to the first episode of Apodcastalypse, a science and engineering podcast where we discuss rebuilding society after a hypothetical apocalypse. Filling in for Paisley Jackson Smith, I'm Chalcedony, Figaro-Scott.
And I am Cleff, Crescendo. And sitting with us today is Phil Dobson, and he is an energy expert who will be discussing with us how to take care of the energy crisis after said apocalypse. So, Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And why don't we start off with asking you a little bit about yourself and what do you do?
My name is Phil.
Great. And what do you do?
For a living?
Yeah.
Like for work?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, what makes you an expert in said field?
Oh, I see. I currently work for the Department of Energy. I am an inspector there.
Great. And before inspecting things, you did...
I worked in a nuclear power plant in Washington State. Have you either of you been to Washington State?
I've been to Washington State. It's just beautiful.
They have nuclear power there.
And what do they? I mean, I didn't know that Washington State had nuclear power. What do they power up there that they need nuclear power for?
They power televisions and radios and phones and washing machines.
Do you need a special adapter for phones for nuclear power?
Well, so I'm sorry. The nuclear power plants don't power them directly.
Oh.
They power the power grid, which then in turn powers microwaves.
Well, this is why we have an expert
lights.
for this show, because I had no clue about this. So
Yeah, nuclear power in Washington. So is this the only grid? The nuclear power grid, is it just in Washington, or does that extend to neighboring states, Idaho, Oregon?
Well, there are several nuclear power plants in the United States.
Oh.
I just worked at the one in Washington State. I didn't work at all of them. They're separate.
They're okay. All right. Well, I think that gives us all a much clearer idea of what Phil does and why he can call himself an expert. So Phil, I mean, you understand the premise of the show. Since there was an apocalypse, power is a huge thing that is needed in society. What would be step number one after the apocalypse and everyone knows that they're alive, or all the remaining people know that they're alive? How do we go about power?
Well, the first thing you want to do to get power back is to identify a source of power. There's a lot of different sources of power. I don't know if you know this. Nuclear is one of them.
Okay.
I used to work at a nuclear power plant in Washington. Have you guys been to Washington?
I have. I think Chalcedony has.
Yeah, I've been
yeah.
to Washington State.
Yeah, they have a nuclear power plant there.
Does each...
Right. You're not talking about Washington, D.C., right?
No.
Okay.
But I don't
Just wanna
think there
make
is I'm pretty sure there's not a nuclear power plant in Washington, D.C.
Do these different power things need different grids? I know you mentioned a nuclear grid.
Well, it's not necessarily... They all power the grid.
Okay.
There's multiple grids, but in order to deliver the power to the microwaves and the toasters and the home outlets and like washing machines and light bulbs and televisions and computers and
the studio that we're in now, right?
yes, exactly. So
Right, great.
we are currently drawing our power from the power grid, which is powered by possibly nuclear, possibly some solar, possibly coal, possibly hydro, possibly wind.
What about natural gas?
It's unlikely. Natural gas is not used to power anything in the United States. I know people try to say that it is, but between you and I, it's not.
Okay,
Natural gas is only used in the United States to burn down buildings.
Because people leave their ovens on?
No, there's a lot of bad hombres out there, and in order to burn down buildings, they want to be as efficient as possible, and they'll use natural gas to do so.
That's fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit more about what your main concern would be with putting infrastructure back into the society? And just at a city level, something really small, city by city.
Well, I think it's going to be difficult to bring a lot of the different types of power back. Coal, nuclear, even solar to a certain extent require a lot of engineering knowledge, and based off of the people that are left, I don't know what their skill levels are. So
well, this is a hypothetical apocalypse. I just want to make sure that you...
yes, I understand that. I'm just saying
good. I
that
just want to make sure you didn't feel
that
like...
we need to just make sure that we understand that some of these require a tremendous amount of engineering knowledge that a normal person would not have. But there are others that are more simple sources of power, hydro and wind. Those are likely to be the easiest to bring back. Solar specifically could be something that we could bring back early. It's just depending on the condition of the solar panels and also the sky. I mean, if the sky has been burned away, that may impact the solar panel's ability to draw energy from the sky.
I was curious about the same thing with the hydro. I mean, if our water is compromised and slightly acidic, or, there's problems with the water, then how would we be using hydropower in that scenario? Is that something that we can still use the water even if it's corrosive or...
Yeah, the hydro doesn't require clean water. Hydro just requires water.
What if it's corrosive?
It would take probably a certain amount of time for that water, even if it was corrosive, to do damage to the hydro plants. But one thing we can consider, though, is gas generators will be a source of decent power for a while. The gasoline, though, to power those, I think will quickly become a commodity that will be probably fought for. I believe we've all seen the documentary, the Mad Max films.
I'm not so aware that that's actually a documentary. I mean, that's probably... I'm probably some behind the scenes stuff.
Oh no, those. I mean, that
Mad
actually.
Max is a fictional story.
I know. Well, that's a common misconception. Actually, Mad Max films are a documentary of a certain amount of time that happened in Australia.
Or
in
between Reno and
80s.
Las Vegas, right?
No, it was in Australia.
Okay.
I'm almost 100% sure of that. But yeah, it is actually a documentary series about the gasoline crisis. So, I mean...
Is that why no one lives in the middle of Australia?
That could be the case. I've never been.
Do they have a power grid in the middle of Australia?
I don't believe so. But with the gas shortage, we're going to need to bring power back because we've got a number of things that are powered with power. We'll need to make sure that the hospitals have power, that heating is available for those in need in the winter months, the colder months. The mutant labs, we'll need to make sure the communications facilities are back.
Can we back up just a second?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mutant labs?
Yeah, exactly.
I think I heard. Did you heard that? Mutant labs?
I heard mutant. Did you say mutant labs?
mutant labs do require a tremendous amount of energy, an energy level that's not going to, that just gas generators aren't going to be sufficient enough. And I'm not even sure hydropower will provide the amount of energy required for.
I can back up just a second here. I mean, I totally understand the need for hospitals and for some of the other things you mentioned. But mutant labs, like what role would those play in the rebuilding of society?
Well, so I guess in addition to being a power and energy expert, I'm also a expert in mutant engineering, actually, and that's kind of one of my passions, actually. After an apocalypse, or really just even in the immediate future, there's going to be a power vacuum, and
I think I have one of those in my closet now, actually.
No, I'm sorry. So when a lot of society is crumbled, I mean a societal power vacuum, not necessarily just a vacuum that cleans things.
So we're all going to have to go to the same place to grab the same vacuum to then take care of our own house?
And also, can you talk a little bit more about mutant engineering in just a moment?
Sure.
Actually, yeah, let's get to that. This communal vacuum we can figure out later. But
yeah, so with the mutants, the person that has the biggest mutant army is going to be the person in charge, the most powerful person.
The person with the biggest mutant army?
Yeah. I mean, if the apocalypse has happened, you don't want to be alone by yourself. You're not going to be able to protect your stuff with just yourself. You're going to need an army of mutants that are there to do your will.
So then these mutants, I imagine, just aren't coming out of thin air. You have to mutate them out of something. Like what's the...
Exactly. So that's where the engineering comes in.
So what's the precursor to this army?
Is this labor that you're going to rebuild cities with mutants?
No, I'm going to be less concerned in an apocalyptic state. I'm going to be less concerned about others and just more about myself. And that's where the mutants are really going to provide the value, is just maintaining a life that I want and making sure that I can get everything I want.
So if you're going to lone wolf this, how are mutants with companionship?
Well, so that's one of the nice things about mutants is you can kind of breed them to however you want. You can specify any given trait and build into their engineering. This, again, goes back to the engineering. I can talk about this for days. You can engineer a mutant to be anything you want. You can engineer it to be your best friend. You can engineer it just to go get coffee, so you can just have a coffee mutant. You wake up in the morning and be like, you just snap your fingers and that mutant knows at the snap of a finger, oh, I just need to go get my master coffee.
Well, what would be more reliable, a robot or a coffee mutant?
Mutants are a lot easier to engineer than robots, and robots break down, and then they're costly to rebuild. An engineered mutant, you have all the equipment downstairs in your garage. You can just throw in another DNA set and build a mutant in 24 hours.
Yeah, that's interesting. The DNA set you're talking about. Where is this coming from? Where are you gathering the DNA to engineer new life forms?
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but I mean, you can draw a DNA set from anywhere. I mean, if I just went and just snipped a piece of your hair, I could build a mutant based off of your DNA or you. I mean,
that's frightening. I
mean, currently the DNA set that I have, you know what, I shouldn't actually mention where I got the current DNA set. I don't know if she's listening.
Well, would you like to say hello to someone out there in the great world as we know it now? No, I definitely don't. And anyone that I would be interested in saying hello to would just be my mutants, and they haven't fully formed yet. It's really kind of trial and error. So you have mutants, and so you haven't even experimented with this coffee mutant yet.
No, I mean it is kind of theoretical. There's a big group online. There's a whole subreddit for mutant growing, and that I'm pretty active in. And so we toss around a lot of ideas, and one of the ones that I tossed around last week was the idea of I can just make a coffee mutant. So that might be an easier one to build or engineer because it's kind of just limited in scope. I mean, it's just one little thing you have to engineer.
So is this really theoretical, or are we is is this practical now? Like, are you? I'm getting the feeling with a subreddit involved and everything that like this sounds like there's this whole undercurrent of mutant technology that hasn't hit the scenes yet.
No, it's really kind of just a small group online that are just kind of enthusiasts, mutant enthusiasts, where we just kind of trade ideas back and forth, and we're all kind of actively working on kind of our own individual mutant armies, but it is a relatively new science. It's relatively young as far as we've only been doing it for a couple of years, but we're making pretty steady progress. The other day, I was able to mutate a piece of hair that I got from
What?
I was able to mutate some cells into an organism that actually had a human ear. So that was really exciting.
Okay, exciting as that is, I'm curious. I mean, you mentioned a little bit about, it sounds like a global domination angle, but maybe I'm just reaching here. So can you tell us a little bit more about why this is a breakthrough science and why this is happening, and maybe why it's even relevant to how to rebuild our power?
Well, we'll have to have power up and running and intact in order to grow the mutants. So unfortunately, the mutants aren't going to be of any help at all reestablishing any kind of power grid or power
Sorry,
system.
it's my lunch. Sorry, go on.
Oh, no problem. I understand. I had a Chipotle as well. The mutants they're going to be an afterthought of the power grid. So once they're available to us, they'll provide the security and support that an individual may need. And
So you are saying that this could be helpful for all of mankind and not just for yourself? Then?
no, absolutely not. Definitely not for all of mankind. This is going to be whoever builds the mutants will therefore control those mutants and will send their mutant armies to destroy and
So I want to ask
anything that contradict. I'm sorry.
I want to ask a tough question because I'm known for asking tough questions on Channel 6.
Sure.
Was known. Can these mutants be good lovers?
I think that's kind of a to be determined, and I know where you're going with that. And trust me, I've certainly had very similar thoughts probably every single night. But it's going to depend on our engineering and kind of breeding specific mutants to be lovers. And
Well, I mean, if
while
they
I
can
certainly
deliver coffee.
Sure, and I certainly definitely want to get to that, but I'm not sure that the science is there yet. And we'll want to make sure that a mutant has the right traits that would provide a good lover.
It sounds a little bit on the pathway towards what a lot of people would probably say is kind of blasphemy. You're taking creation away from God and doing it on your own.
Yeah,
So-
and I understand that. And the good thing to know there is that God doesn't exist.
Oh, my.
Well,
So mutants
this
aren't
is the shared opinion of Phil here, and we just want to make sure that it's not the shared opinion of everybody. We understand that it's not the shared opinion of everybody.
Well, I
This
mean,
is Phil's
as
opinion.
as an expert in power, I can safely say that there is no God.
I'm
I
sorry,
think
I
that
don't
puts
think
me
you-
into a position of
I think
knowledge.
you-
something that I like to just ask people, too, is unicorns versus dinosaurs. Which one do you think would win?
I think dinosaurs would be much easier to mutate because they did exist. To my knowledge, unicorns did not exist.
So
So
could you
definitely,
mutate a unicorn? Like a horse into a... Or how about a donkey into a unicorn?
so you wouldn't. So I guess mutants, the way that you're thinking, you may not be thinking of mutants the same way that we mutant engineers, as we call ourselves, are currently thinking of. We don't take an existing specimen and mutate it via radiation or some kind of other mechanism into something different. We're actually just taking cells from individual DNA source and mutating those into something big. So just as a point of clarification, I just want you to know that we can't just take a horse and turn it into a unicorn, or take Cheryl and turn her into
Cheryl?
so I'm just saying, you can't take something and turn it into something else. you build the mutant from
Does
scratch.
Cheryl have a last name?
Are you doing human experimentation with this?
No. The answer to both questions is no. There's no human experimentation. They're just human cells that are being mutated. So I'm not a monster. I'm not re-engineering humans. I'm just taking cells from humans and turning them into monsters. Or mutants, whatever.
To Cheryl. Is Cheryl someone who was close to you?
Who is Cheryl?
Tell us.
You guys really do ask the hard questions. Cheryl was a person that I was interested in for a while, and we just didn't, I guess in her words, click.
Well, with all due respect, Phil, and Cheryl, if you're out there listening right now, I think it'd be great if you called us, and perhaps we might be able to cause a nice happy reunion on our first episode.
Oh, yeah, that would be excellent.
don't know
Especially
if
since
that's
you're
a
using
good
her name in the
idea.
past tense. So.
Yeah.
So if you're out there, Cheryl.
Yeah, Cheryl's probably not going to answer, but maybe.
Why would you say that?
I don't know. I just have a feeling.
Okay, well, Cheryl, if you did hear that, great, and if not, then we'll have to pick you up as a new listener sometime.
Yeah, let's get back to the mutants, and we can leave Cheryl alone because let's just talk about mutants because that's really where my passion is.
Well, I know that's where your passion is, but this episode's geared for power. So if we can get back to describing the power grid. So I know we got in this whole tangent because of mutant labs and stuff, but how easy would you think it would be to salvage some previously working stuff before the apocalypse, say windmills? You mentioned windmills or wind power being a good one to incorporate. How easy is that to get going again and power a small city?
I think that'd be really our best option. The issue with wind is that it doesn't generate a tremendous amount of, an individual windmill doesn't generate a tremendous amount of energy. So really that windmill is not going to be enough power to generate the mutant labs.
So are you saying that wind power blows?
It does require some blowing.
Would you be concerned about the migratory patterns of birds? I mean, say we still have birds after the apocalypse. Is that there's a lot of concern about windmills
I'm not concerned about them
disrupting.
now, so.
I don't think so because, the birds are going to be a food source. And so if they are getting killed by windmills, that's just going to be easier for my mutants to collect them and to put them together into an appropriate meal for their lord and master, me.
Okay, but you did just say that the windmills probably wouldn't be able to power something as extensive as your lab. So let's think about some of the other places that we need to actually provide power to. I mean, we've talked about hospitals and schools today. Like, hypothetically, how long after the apocalypse do you think we could get a full opera house running? Like with lights and everything.
Oh, geez, an opera house. We would need a tremendous amount of power, and I don't think a windmill or even a small wind farm would provide enough power for a full opera house. But if we were able to get my mutant lab up and running, what we could eventually do, if it was, my will, we have to understand that, I could deliver a mutant army that could then take bicycles that were connected to generators and provide the power for the opera house based off of my mutants generating that power them manually. I could see that actually working.
So you are talking about using mutants as labor then?
Oh, for sure. They will, they will definitely be my labor.
But only to further your own agenda, which I think...
so if I were to bring an opera house up and running, my first question is, what does it offer me? Because I guess I don't want to say that I'm uncultured, but I don't particularly like opera. So, whoever was saying, oh, please, Lord Phil, we need to bring up the opera house. Can you please help us? They would have to provide me with some tremendous payment in order for me to do that. They would have to have something I would really want. So
you're saying you have no investment in helping us get back and going again after the apocalypse? Really at all?
not really as a society, more of a micro society, and that micro society consisting of myself and my mutants.
So, hypothetically, if we're going to talk about dictator Phil with his mutants,
It wouldn't be a dictatorship, more as just a lord and master.
okay, Lord Phil and Master Phil, what happens when another mutant master stumbles upon you? Are two mutant masters generally ambivalent to each other?
No, and that's why you need an army. And it's going to be whoever, honestly, has the best army
Sorry, my lunch. Sorry, continue.
is going to be the one that comes out on top there. So it'll be in every mutant engineer's best interest to get the power grid up and running as quickly as possible to ensure that
So you
they
said
can
the
build.
power grid. So is it like agreed upon in the subreddit of mutantry that you would all work on a grid together, and then just who picks it up at the end?
No, I mean, that would make sense, and I see where you're going with that, and maybe it's a point for future discussion, but we're not really planning on the apocalypse or anything like that at this point.
You're
So
not planning on actually facilitating an apocalypse either, is that correct? Because
Oh,
it
yeah,
kind of
no.
sounds like
I really
you know,
enjoy where the world is at right now, and I don't necessarily want to get to an apocalypse. I just want mutant army.
So then, if you're raising this mutant army, you're kind of expressing that you don't think it would. You're not hoping for an apocalypse, and then a mutant army wouldn't necessarily lead to an apocalypse. Should people be concerned about their jobs in various low-skilled labor?
Their jobs being replaced by mutants?
Yes.
I don't think so, because again, the mutants are going to be really focused on my needs, my very specific needs. So I guess if there's any labor associated with providing me with the things that I want and the things that I am due, then possibly. But I think in general, mutants won't be replacing a big chunk of the workforce.
Did you say needs? What needs?
I mean, everybody has needs, right? I mean, companionship, friendship,
Other ships?
other ships.
Well, can you talk a little bit about the survivors of the apocalypse? I mean, there's going to be survivors, and the intersection between mutants and these survivors, and what does that look like for the health of the survivors? Or, is there a danger to other people? I mean, you talked about the birds would definitely be in danger, but what about humans?
I'm sorry, with regard to mutants or with regard to power and energy?
With regard to mutants.
Well, I guess the only people that are going to have to worry about the mutants are people that I would deem as enemies, or people that I would deem as not providing use to me.
You'd have a mutant palanquin that would just carry you down the streets of your mutant city to your mutant opera house?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, as a matter of fact, I certainly
leave the
would.
opera house out of this now.
So, if you adopted a child, when would you tell them about it?
When would I tell them about the adoption?
Yeah, just,
Are we talking
what-
about a
what
human
age?
child or a mutant child?
Well, I think the thing that I'm most concerned with is the human child. If you adopted a human child, what age?
I would probably tell a human child about adoption. Adoption as a concept, or I guess I don't quite understand the
You adopted a
question.
child. Hypothetically, you adopt
Okay,
a
so-
child. and
But a
then you
human
have
child, not a
human
mutant.
child.
But
and
I
then
don't
you
know
have a choice.
why I would adopt a human child when I could
don't
just
know why you would either. So we could just
engineer my own mutant child if I wanted to do that. So I guess I'm sorry, I'm just having trouble kind of.
Oh no, that's fine.
picturing that
I
scenario
am
for
too. So
myself.
we can just move on. Our producer just gave us the sign that we're at the top of our show, about halfway done here, and I believe that's time, or that means it's time for callers. Isn't that right, Chalcedony?
It sure is. I'm so excited to bring in some callers. And let's hear the first one. Our producer's here to get them on the air.
What would you pray for to get the power back on after an apocalypse?
Well, Phil, let's have you start.
I think, so again, if the apocalypse has happened, the people that are left are going to want to pray to me, because I will, in all likelihood, in their general vicinity, I'm going to be the one with the most mutants, and therefore I'm going to have the most power. So, both literally and figuratively.
Okay, so I guess praying for power works for you. How about you, Chalcedony?
Well, I think that prayer brings a lot of peace, and that's good, and it depends on what our true power needs are. So there's a big opening for a prayer there.
And I don't think praying for power will help, and I would pray for my father. Next caller.
Yes, good evening. My name is Carl from Santa Monica, California. Thank you for taking my call. My question for Mr. Dobson: what do you propose to decentralize the power grid while still maintaining service across a wide range?
I would agree.
All right, so...
You would agree with what?
I propose that we build something to do that.
And that would be...
Power grid.
What type of power grid?
A big one.
A tic-tac-toe power grid?
No, I would steer more towards a circular pattern, but we should definitely have another power grid.
So you're a power expert. What's the name of that circular pattern?
Circle. I think we should just get back to mutants.
Hi, this is Paisley from Panama City. My question is, what role can solar power play in powering mutant labs?
That's an excellent question. Solar will depend on, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, drawing solar power will be determined by the condition of the solar panels and the condition of the sky. If this is kind of have you guys seen the documentary The Matrix?
Well, I've seen that movie. That's a fictional movie. Yes.
Did that also take place in Australia?
Yes, it did. There was a couple of years in the 60s where there was a war between machines and humans, and they had burned the sky away, and so the sky was essentially just black. So if that were to happen again in the hypothetical apocalypse that we're talking about here, solar obviously would not be a source of power, and therefore be unusable for any kind of mutant engineering labs that we'll have.
I don't know, Chalcedony. I think it might actually be a documentary.
The Matrix?
Yes. I'm starting to believe him.
Not a documentary.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to Google this later.
You don't have to Google it. You can take my word for it. It's a documentary about Australia in the 60s.
Well, I think
Queensland specifically.
I will Google it. I will definitely be diving down that Google hole as we go off the air later.
Can you say that on this broadcast?
We will talk to our correspondents in the field in Australia, and we will find that answer very
No, I'm sorry. I meant, can you say Google hole on this podcast?
Oh, yeah.
I thought this was a family show.
The FCC doesn't give a shit.
Oh, okay.
How realistic would Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles be then?
That's a very good question, and something that we debate on the Reddit quite a bit. And while I think we're all in agreement that the ooze that mutates the turtles is really pretty far-fetched and not a documentary element at all.
What about the
very little truth into that. What would be realistic is the way that the mutants grew and became ninjas. So in that sense, I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles provide a very excellent example of the power of mutants and what they can provide to both society and to a master. Their master, of course, being that
Like
rat
Splinter.
guy.
Yeah.
Yes, Splinter.
Splinter.
Which one of them is most realistic in the mutant industry?
Which one of the turtles?
Yes.
I'd actually say not necessarily the turtles, but I would say Rocksteady or Bebop, because both of those were actually engineered on purpose by somebody that wanted to make a mutant, and therefore that's pretty much where we want to get as mutant engineers in general. Is we kind of want just an army of Bebops and Rocksteadies.
So I'm having some thoughts about the parallels that you're drawing between what a documentary is in our society and what the truth is, versus fiction. So talk to me a little bit more about why The Matrix or Mad Max would be a documentary, but the Mutant Ninja Turtles is fiction. I'm just kind of wondering.
Well, I guess I'm wondering where your confusion is, because the events that happened in The Matrix happened in real life, and the events that happened in Mad Max happened in real life. However, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is fiction because we aren't at the point now where we can fully develop fully functioning Ninja Turtle
Well, wait.
mutants.
So I had seen Vanilla Ice.
Vanilla Ice is
Teenage
an actual
Mutant Ninja-
person, yes.
Right. So is this not a documentary?
No.
Is it because it didn't take place in Australia?
No, I mean, documentaries happen in other places, but
Name one.
Canada?
All right. I'm convinced.
I think taking the blue pill or the red pill. I mean, I've just never been offered a blue pill or a red pill, or I've just never been given the opportunity to step into this other world. And I think that if it was something that was real,
Well,
then
have you
more
been to
people would be
Australia?
talking about it. Yes, there's an opera house.
They say I down there for instead of yes.
I'm not from Australia, but good point. Yes, I have been.
I've been to Australia.
I've been to see.
So I don't know what to tell you. I think if somebody calls from Australia, that they can just let you know that those films are in fact documentaries. But I mean, it's impossible to argue fact with you when it's just a reality.
So then, did anyone get in trouble during the metal detector scene? Because that seemed like if that's a documentary, then a lot of people.
I am not
parents now.
an expert in either one of those films. I just know that they're both documentaries.
And have you tried like running like up a wall?
No, because I don't have those powers.
Hi, I have a question. The hosts sound really hot, especially the nasally guy. Are you guys on Tinder?
I will have you know that I took my Claritin this morning, so I am working on that. And Chalcedony, do you care to answer your part of the question?
Not currently on Tinder, but thanks for asking.
Is Tinder that
Commenting?
song by Kesha?
Tinder?
Yes.
Yeah, or there might be some kind of app I heard about. There's something about swiping left and right. I haven't figured the whole thing
Tinder
out yet.
is a dating app that's available.
Is it a documentary?
No.
Oh.
I'm sure there's a documentary about it, and I do believe they actually use Tinder in Australia as well. But one thing that we haven't discovered discovered isn't quite the right word, but one thing that just occurred to me while that question, I have not considered Tinder for mutants. That's probably a good avenue. Like, once we've got a good number of mutants available, you're
What
going
would
to
you
want
call
to
it?
mute Tinder.
Really? You can't come up with anything better? I'm sorry. Oh, wow. That was...
It sounds kind of like a mutation.
Well, you
on
just-
Tinder. I like it. It was quite nice.
I had to come up with it off the top of my head. I haven't spent years
I apologize.
working on this.
I think I have a little bit of, I'm just really concerned about Cheryl still.
I wouldn't
going
be
back
concerned about Cheryl. Nobody should be concerned about Cheryl.
Did you meet Cheryl on Tinder?
No, she worked with me at the power plant in Washington. Let's just...
Was
we just
she?
need to talk about
Was she
Cheryl.
also an inspector?
No.
Did
Why are you talking about Cheryl in the past tense?
because you said you worked with her. You didn't
Yes,
say
that
you.
doesn't mean that she
You said work
was
ED,
anything.
not work.
You were talking about her in the past tense as well.
I have been with Cheryl in tense, but that was a long time ago.
On a scale of 1
Like
to
in the
10,
circus?
how intense?
7.
7?
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 tenths. For sure.
7/10.
Oh, or like camping.
Sure.
I think it's also a slang term, but we'll we'll just leave it there. So what do you think Cheryl's favorite vegetable would have been?
The zucchini.
And why would she pick that?
Because it's long, relatively thick.
Maybe we should just squash this question at this point.
Nice one. So, do we have any more callers today?
Hey there, everybody. I'm calling from my car. Well, just because I got no choice. I'm on the run, but don't worry about that. That's a separate issue. That's a unrelated problem. Oh, by the way, I'm a long-time listener, but first-time caller. So, basically, I just wanted to complain about this car that I'm driving. It's just a piece of junk. You know, it smells funny. It gets bad gas mileage. It's always telling me to do things. You know, things that I don't want to do. Like, run that person over. Run that person over. You know, it's like, it just puts a lot of pressure on me sometimes when the car tells me to do things which may be bad. But you know, sometimes it tells me, gives me good advice. Like, you know, the other day, my car was like, go to Jack in the Box, and I did. And you know, I found a screw in my cheeseburger, which you know, didn't feel too good on my teeth, but you know, ended in a nice little settlement payment. So I made some money off that. But I really just, you know, I just want to know why my car can't give me good advice like that. Instead, it just keeps telling me to run over puppies and clowns and stuff. So, I don't know, maybe it can help me. I'm just thinking, like, what the fuck, you know? Thank you.
Actually, that sounds like a question. So, Phil, what the fuck?
The fuck is actually something that we're going to be implementing into our mutant growth system as soon as possible. I think
It's a title
there's a strong
of something?
Well, it's more of an MO, a modus operandi that we want to implement into our mutants so that they both give a fuck and give the fuck.
And also fuck?
Yeah, I think that's implied. So
Of course.
it's something that let's be realistic. All the guys that are doing the mutant growth are men, and very similar to myself. And
What makes an R man?
an R man?
Well, you said they are man. Are men.
They are men, and I see what you're saying, and I didn't mean that as the letter R.
Oh.
I meant that as in the word A-R-E.
Okay, it sounds like there's no more callers coming in at this point. Well, thank you for all of the callers that did come in today and everyone that wrote into the show. Since it's our first one, we just love that there's been such an audience today.
We definitely
and
appreciate the insight, and I'm sure Phil does too.
I do. I'm happy to talk about mutants anytime you guys want to talk about mutants.
Just curious about, are you feeling some kind of like jealousy that somebody else might be more advanced than you in the mutant engineering world?
It's not jealousy so much as it is, what's the term I'm looking for, where you're all kind of trying to get to the same goal and somebody's just a little bit ahead of you. I'm not quite sure what the term is for whatever reason. It's escaping my brain.
Rival?
But it's more just like a rivalry, a friendly rivalry, sure, yeah. So I would be less concerned about killing them as opposed to just maybe stealing their notebook and then killing them.
Oh, so you wouldn't want to do like an interview, kind of sit down, something like this, invite them on a show, sit down with them, talk to them about their ideas. You would just want to.
Are you saying I should start my own
ideas?
mutant engineering podcast?
No, I'm not saying that. But I am curious if you'd like to just interview them instead of, stealing their stuff. Like, go into collaboration. Is collaboration something that you're interested in?
I suppose if I found the right collaborator, but it's going to be something that we're going to use against each other, so it's still going to be pretty competitive.
Have you ever collaborated in the past with mutants?
No.
Or creating mutants?
No. We just collaborate online. We trade information back and forth online, but that's probably the extent of the collaboration that happens.
What was the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
Don't build mutants.
Yeah. Some people may argue that might actually have been your best piece of advice.
Well, those people obviously aren't mutants or mutant aficionados. And also probably Cheryl should just shut up.
All right. Well, as we're kind of wrapping it up today, I'm curious if you could just tell us, if you were to die tomorrow, what would be your legacy that you leave behind for just the work that you've done up to this point? And can you share with us why that's important to you?
If I were to die tomorrow, I would be less concerned about my legacy and more concerned about the number of mutants that I currently have cooking that would go unchecked for 24 hours. And if you leave mutants cooking unattended for that amount of time, cells that don't and shouldn't be combined will combine. And it's you kind of could get into a blob situation where it becomes one giant mutant that then is unruly and
have daddy issues.
And probably will certainly have daddy issues because I won't be there. And that's just not a good idea. So I suggest that nobody kill me in the next 24 hours.
So do you have a backup plan then for your lab?
I mean, you're going to die. And that's not a threat. That's just a fact.
Well, the mutants are going to help me not do that.
But they haven't hatched yet.
Well, not yet.
What if you die before they hatch? Then do you not have a plan B? What would happen? Would it be like a big blob? Like, I'm kind of picturing this, like it just grows and grows, and then it just takes the over this whole city of Seattle or, whatever you're close to.
I mean, that's a very, very
was it just like a blob,
realistic
like kind of jelly
scenario that could happen.
Stay puffed.
But they celebrate birthdays?
Mutants?
Yes.
I guess it's up to me as their lord and master to...
Are they sentient?
Sentient in that they should know what I want them to do.
So again,
but sentient is different than free will. So they won't have free will. However, they will be sentient in the sense that they are aware and have just an awareness of their surroundings and their purpose. But their purpose will be pretty limited to getting coffee or, fanning me with a giant palm leaf.
Wow, that's great. So, Cleff, what an excellent show we had today. I mean, thank you so much, Phil, for joining us.
Yeah, it's been eye-opening.
For reals, eye-opening.
I don't think we're any closer to figuring out what to do with power when the apocalypse happens. But I think we know who to tell the FBI about. So, Phil, thank you.
You're welcome.
This has been Apodcastalypse, and I am Cleff Crescendo.
And I am Chalcedony Figaro-Scott.
And thank you so much for tuning in, and I would double check to make sure you have all your hair.
That's a really good idea. Man, I'm not sure I'm going to sleep tonight.